Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Saturday morning at the Art Clinic Online. We have a couple of really incredible painters this morning that we'd like to introduce to you today and have us discuss. Before we get into our artists, I do want to let you know about a couple things happening with Art Clinic Online. The first is starting next month, May, which is actually in a couple days. Bennett Vadnais, who has been a past presenter at the Art Clinic Online, is going to be exhibiting some of his paintings in the Stone Tower, second floor at Gleneco Park. These are incredible acrylic, high realism landscape type paintings. He'll be doing a demonstration of his egg tempera technique on Carousel Day, which is May 3rd at Gleneco Park, which is just full of incredible exhibitions and artist demos and things like that. And actually, below Bennett, on the first floor of the Stone Tower, our presenter next week, Eric, can I really get his name right? Cellulé, who's actually my neighbor down the street, but an incredible artist who has a studio down in the Otis Street area. But he's been a teacher of art for over 40 years, and he's a sculptor, a painter, a printmaker, just an incredible artist altogether. So his exhibition will be on the first floor of the Stone Tower Gallery starting actually next Friday. I want to say, which is the Art Walk at Gleneco Park. So if you're in DC area, there's a lot of Art Clinic Online activity happening at Gleneco Park in particular. So we're very proud about that. So please, on Fridays from 6 to 8 p.m. is the opening reception. It's Art Walk at Gleneco Park. You can come see two receptions for two Art Clinic Online artists at the Stone Tower, which is pretty awesome. So it's pretty neat. So I wanted to get that out there right now. But aside from that, I'd like to introduce our host for today, which is Lindsay Mueller, who is a past presenter and represented at the Ida Rose Gallery. You may have seen her incredible exhibition recently. Hopefully, she can kind of talk a little bit about that before her introduction. Go back and take a look at her presentation. Oh gosh, when was that, Lindsay? Do you remember? That sounds right. Yeah, it was an exceptional talk, and go back and take a look at that really quick. Not today, of course, but maybe tomorrow after today,
Right.
and take a look at that because it's really her paintings are really just visceral and thick, and they really get at the heart of plein air painting, but in a different kind of way than our artists today. So, without further ado, I'll pass the torch to Lindsay.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here today. I just wanted to, well, I guess briefly, as Jordan said, I can say I just had an exhibition at Otta Rose Gallery. It actually just closed yesterday, but it was really a great time and I enjoyed that experience. And I in part got introduced to Jordan through Otta Rose because she is the one who invited me and hosted me in early September for my talk that I did here. And so that's been a great relationship for me, but also really exciting to be connected with ACO. I wanted to invite today Kate Fleming here to talk. Kate is one of my good friends that I met a few years ago. So I met Kate through my friend Marie Gauthier, who I also think would give a great talk here if ever interested. But so Marie and I went to American University together for our master's program, and I met Kate because Marie invited her to come speak about this project that she had did. And I thought it was it was like, I mean, a friend talk coming to speak with our cohort. But what really, I mean, first struck me about Kate and her work was that Kate is so project oriented and was able to like have a plan and be very decisive about how she'd make a larger body of paintings. And that's something that I feel like I've never quite done. And I was like, oh, wow, it was just a totally different way of working that I was super interested in. And I'm also a planning oriented person. And so I really respected and it resonated with me, Kate's way of I mean, her paintings emerge individually. And I think there's a lot of chance or not chance, but they develop on their own. They're not super pre-planned before you go and actually make them, but the process of what you're going to make and structuring out how many are you going to make and what does that cohesively mean together, I found that just really valuable and interesting. And Kate at that time was speaking about her 50 States project, which is she'll talk more about, I'm assuming, right? So I won't
Yes.
talk about that. But so that was what Kate, or the body of work that I was first introduced to from Kate. But then beyond that, Kate recently had a show at Hillier in January, in January. And so I know go into that more. Her show August, that was a really wonderful body of work. And they're just really I really like dark paintings, paintings that have like dark but chromatic. I think that's really exciting. And I mean, she has beautiful mark making in her paintings as well. The way that she's able to find forms and objects and like use shapes, it feels both her marks always feel very decisive in color, but also in like how they carve out space. And I guess that's why I'm also just really excited to look at her paintings as well. And so that was a really lovely show, and I just thought that it'd be really great, yeah, for you to be here and get to talk about your work a little bit. I'm excited to hear more about it. I couldn't make it to your Your Artist talk, so I'm hoping that this, I get to hear some of it now. Yeah, thank you for being here today, Kate. I'm really excited to hear more about your work.
Wow, thank you, Lindsay, for that really kind introduction. It's always nice to get a compliment from another painter because you know that's for real. So thank you very much. I guess I will start to share my screen. Great. Thank you all so much for coming to my talk on this Saturday morning. And if you're watching this later recorded, thank you for that as well. I thought since it's a Saturday morning, we could go for a little joyride. So much of my work has been about, surrounding, influenced by cars and car culture. And I've also driven a lot of cars in my life and also destroyed some cars. So even though I'm not a car person, it's sort of heavily layered within my life and within my experience. Um, so this talk is going to be in three parts. Also, you see at the bottom, there's a teeny little arrow. That arrow is going to make its way across the screen. Once it reaches our final destination on the right side of the screen, the talk is over. So you can see how we're progressing as we go. I'm also going to start a timer for myself so that I keep track and we don't go forever because these are big projects and I could definitely talk for like a really long time, but I won't keep you here for that. I don't know if the video is going to work very well because I know we're over Zoom, but here we are. I thought we would start in the year 2009. We're driving down the street by my high school, and right here is where I wrecked my first car. I was waving to a friend in my 1997 Volkswagen Jetta and rear-ended the person in front of me. And I was devastated because that car for me was, independence and freedom as it is for so many Americans and so many people who live in the suburbs. And of course, I grew up in Arlington. This is not that exact Volkswagen Jetta, but it looked like this for visual effect. And here's the very bad painting that I made of it when I was 17 years old. I was crushed when this car was wrecked and it was totaled. So this was my in memoriam painting of it and sort of my beginning of my love affair with and deep sentimental attachment to cars. After graduating high school, I went to college at William and Mary. And we have Nikki Santiago here, who is one of my teachers at William and Mary. This is a section of the Colonial Park, a parking lot that I used to go and park in my car and sometimes, have a little cry after a bad crit. So this is another sort of instance of the car being, my independence and also like sort of my protective shield. And I think everybody can relate at least to that experience of, this, especially when you're living in a dorm room with shared people, this is sort of like your place of solitude. At that point, I was driving a 1996 Acura Integra, which looked a fair bit worse than this one that I got off of Google Images. This is a little painting I made while I was at William and Mary. I was starting to play around with plein air painting. I was studying painting in a very observational sense. And I also majored in cultural studies and was looking at a lot of cultural texts and thinking a lot about Roland Barthes and semiotics and symbols and signs and all these things like that. So those two pieces of my education have sort of been woven into my work as I've gone along as well. So now it's 2016. We are in the red center of Australia. This is not my video, but it did look exactly like this when I was there. This is a time in my life when I had another van. Um, I was working a job shortly after college that I hated. My partner, Tom, was also working a job that he hated. So we decided to run away to Australia, as you do, for 6 months. And in Australia, there's this really strong backpacker culture and also van culture. So there are all these old vans that are sort of passed on from person to person. And we bought this van from a pair of German backpackers, and it was a 1996 Mitsubishi Express and an absolute piece of shit. But we loved it so much, and I did cry when we sold it. Here it is, getting towed with its little thank you sticker on the back, which was great because it was the slowest car in the world. So it was nice to be able to show people behind us, thank you so much for letting us in front. Also, so sorry. So here's a view that is my own photo from Australia. So I didn't go there for art purposes. I went there just to run away and to sort of have my freedom, right? Um, but while I was there, I did end up making a lot of images. Mostly I was drawing the suburban landscape, which is something that, sort of started then, but has been a theme throughout my work of the last decade. So I was making these sketchbook drawings, which you can see one on the left, of sort of like suburban detritus. I'm really interested in the sort of mundane lived experience. I'm not so interested in like the big emotions. I'm interested in like the little things, the everyday. So you can see like there's in here like satellite dishes and power lines and things like that. When I returned to the States, I started making all these drawings into lino cut prints. Here's another one from our front porch. This is in Melbourne and St. Kilda. This is a storefront in Balmain, which is in Sydney. And I was thinking a lot about also sort of the velvety blackness of shadow, especially when using oil-based inks in printmaking. There's a velvety quality about that really cannot be replicated by any other medium, in my experience. So that's how this installation came about, which from this photo, you can't really tell what's going on. It looks a bit like I've photoshopped this image, but this was a residency that I did at Capitol Hill Arts Workshop. So I thought I had the idea of, can I create a shadow in space? So let me show you another image. So this is all made up of black velvet, which is covering every surface in this space. So I projected an image onto this space from one particular vantage point and then covered it all in velvet over the course of many weeks. It's very difficult to photograph because the velvet really sucks the light, which is exactly why I wanted to use velvet. But I did coat every single sort of window pane and bit of trim, and there was an elaborate grate over this sort of vent, and it was all very meticulous. Here's a video of sort of my process over the 5 weeks of building this installation. And as you can see on the walls, I also showed those lino cut prints alongside this process. I don't know if this video is lagging or not, but you get the idea. So anyway, while I was at that residency, and also while I was in Australia, I started thinking about the US. And as we were traveling around Australia, I realized there were so many people there that were better traveled in the US than I was. Australians are really well traveled. They're very far away from everything and everyone, and they were that. And as we were traveling around, I kept meeting people who were saying, "Oh yes, I've been to Miami, I've been to Chicago, I've been to LA." And my reaction was, "Oh, I haven't been actually to any of those places." And then at the same time, the year that we got back, the year that Trump was first elected, and that was a real moment of realizing that I was even more connected from my home nation than I ever realized. And I felt like the only thing I could do about it was to go see the country. So in 2019, my partner Tom and I took off on a road trip across America to all 50 states. We did fly to Hawaii and Alaska. Here's some footage from the road. So we're now in 2019, and we are now in our 2040 Connie, which is where I'm located now. This is when we first left for our trip. My parents took this video as we were leaving. Here's the van, glamour shot of Connie. So basically, oh, and also here it is getting towed, of course. My question for this trip was, what can we literally see today that we couldn't see yesterday and won't see tomorrow? I've always been really interested in documenting the now. I think it's very easy to make nostalgic images, and my more recent work is very nostalgic, but at this moment in time, I was thinking, how can I capture the now? How can I make images that in 10, 20, 50 years will be markers of this particular moment in time? We'll look at those images and say, oh, that's so 2019, that's so 2020, which is very difficult to tease apart in the landscape, the things that are markers of now, because we just see them as nothing. We don't notice them at all. So I began painting landscapes. My idea for this trip was to paint our sort of shared national aesthetic. Especially in these like very divided times, I thought, what's the one thing that we all have? Oh, parking lots, gas stations, Walmarts. Our visual experience of the world is shared and very similar, no matter where you are. All 50 states have landscapes like this, I can now confidently say. I made all the paintings plein air. Here's a video that shows the scale of these. They're mostly like postcard size images. They were all made in one sitting, and they're all oil on gessoed watercolor paper. Here's a painting of a Walmart parking lot, which I made many, many of for a couple of reasons. One, I find them really visually interesting. There's so many stripes in the parking lot. And two, Walmart has really dominated this sort of commercial landscape of America in the past couple of decades, sort of obliterating smaller local businesses. And, on the one hand, that's devastating, but also it just is, right? And I'm interested in making images that are just about what we have now. McDonald's, another one that is not everybody's favorite thing to see in the landscape, but, it dominates our experience of the world. Everyone in America has seen a McDonald's. I really like this quote by Robert Frank. Opinion often consists of criticism, but criticism can come out of love. Robert Frank produced a book called The Americans, which was a collection of photographs and he's not American, he's Swiss. And this was in the 40s, and it was sort of some post-war or around that time. I can't remember if it was 40s or 50s, but anyway, the book was seen as rather critical of the nation, and people were upset about it. But as an American, my friend Kristen, who's actually here listening, has always referred to me as sort of like a relentless patriot, which is very difficult in these times, for sure. But, there are many things to love about this country, and it is my home, no matter what, although I reserve the right to relentlessly criticize this nation through images as well. This is a gas station, of course. I painted many of those. So the sort of criticism is almost like the images are both extremely sincere and as a little bit sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I completely am aware of and understand the absurdity of creating an oil painting of a gas station. So these images all came together in an exhibition. Actually, it ended up being 3 exhibitions, but this was the first one. It was called People From Away. Tom is a street photographer, and his street photography images were included in this exhibition as well. We showed over 150 works in an empty retail space that we converted into a pop-up gallery in Georgetown. It was a ton of work. So backing up a little bit, this is actually the very first painting that I made on the road, and this is filmed exactly where I'm sitting right at this moment. The weather was kind of not cooperating. This was the third day of the trip, and I was like, man, I haven't made a painting yet. I really need to make a painting. So I thought, okay, I'll try to paint inside the car. Um, and it was an idea that then I revisited later on. This is a video installation that was part of sort of the video that I showed at the beginning, was included in the gallery, and the back seat from our van was in the gallery. So you could sit there and feel like you were traveling through all 50 states with us. It was about an hour-long video, and a sort of mesmerizing and calming video in the end. This is another painting from the 50 States project that I made from inside the car. This was the first one that I really used the car as a framing device. This is a painting of a 7-Eleven parking lot. This is actually in Sturgis, South Dakota, and I don't know if anybody knows much about Sturgis, but it's where the largest motorcycle gathering in the US happens every year. So Tom was actually out taking pictures of motorcyclists and crazy stuff. I was just sitting in my little McDonald's parking lot, capturing these sort of lights at night. The American road trip is something that has been done again and again and again. And when we were preparing for this trip, Tom and I, we did a lot of research and a lot of writing. My goal was to read every single American road trip memoir, which I did not do, but I did read many of them. And we kept thinking about it in this way. It's like the census almost. It's like the census data only sort of provides information and context in relation to the previous census. And we have to keep doing censuses in order to keep sort of understanding the nation. These road trip projects that have been undertaken over time by so many different artists, including, I mentioned Robert Frank, this is Lee Friedlander, George O'Keeffe, Edward Hopper, so many other photographers. They sort of all speak to each other and work in relation to each other. So we felt like we were sort of adding another data point to this sort of legacy and through our travels. So these images by Lee Friedlander are all taken from within the car, and served as a pretty strong influence for this next set of work. Part 3 is the car as a lens. So now it's 2024, it's nighttime, and we are going to 7-Eleven. This is just down the street. This is the 7-Eleven actually that I grew up going to in Arlington, Virginia. So this is a painting that I made of that 7-Eleven. I decided that I was going to paint every 7-Eleven in Arlington, because a friend and I, when I was in high school, decided that we were going to go to every 7-Eleven in Arlington in one night. And at that time, we went to, I don't know, 11 or 12 7-Elevens in the night. And it was just one of those things, like when you're a kid, there's not a whole lot to do except drive around. So much of the suburban sort of existence is shaped by the car. The landscape itself is shaped by the car, as shown by my 50 States work, but also, convenience stores exist sort of in relationship to the car. And the parking lots outside the convenience stores, like 7-Eleven, they become third spaces. So it's, in the suburban landscape, we lack third spaces, which, if you're not familiar with that term, first space is home, second space is work, and the third space is something else, a gathering community space. In a landscape defined by cars, we really lack third spaces. So what becomes a third space is the parking lot. So after I made this painting, I realized, all right, I've made a lot of paintings like this. I sort of look at this landscape in a different way. So I started painting inside the car. I learned that there are, in fact, 28 7-Elevens in Arlington, which was a whole lot more than I thought. But of course, I love a set. I love a challenge. I forgot to mention the 50 States set, project, but I made 200 paintings during my travels, and I love repetition. It really, I find that the closer I look, the more that I see, and I never tire of it. After traveling to all 50 states and making landscape paintings, I've just honed in on one, 60 or 27 square miles is Arlington County, and it provides infinite sort of fodder for image making for me, especially at night. I love making images at night. Georgia O'Keeffe, who I mentioned earlier, she actually painted inside her car. She had a Ford Model A, which was a big deal at that time. Not a lot of women had their own cars. But of course, she was living in New York with Alfred Stieglitz, and then she had Ghost Ranch in New Mexico. And she would drive her Model A from New York to New Mexico a couple times a year, which I think is incredible. And she had her back seat set up so that the back of the seat was an easel. I haven't seen any pictures of it, but I've read about it. It sounds very cool. So here's another picture or another painting of a 7-Eleven from inside the car, sort of the same view as that Lee Freelander image from earlier. And if it loads, here's a little video that kind of shows what my setup was like. Is extremely tight, close quarters in the car. But I love the sort of like challenge of that. I love a challenge. I'm not much of a studio painter. I really prefer to be outside in the elements on site. I also really this body of work and this show that I made was about summer specifically and about summer nights and the sort of a hot summer night and being outside. So as I was making this work, I was kind of in my happiest place, sweating it out in my car in a parking lot, making images. The other thing about working at night is that there's only so much that you can control in terms of lighting. And I had a couple of book lights, clipped on in different places. I was wearing a headlamp, but it's not at all the controlled lighting situation of a studio, which is probably for some painters an absolute nightmare. And for me, a little bit too. But then it also forces this sort of looseness because you can't quite tell exactly what's going on. Um, as I was spending time painting out in the car, generally people left me alone. I made all the paintings on site, but occasionally people would talk to me, and only once did I get kicked out. And that was pretty sort of gentle anyway. An employee came out of the store and just sort of waved his hands at me in front of the van. So then I made this painting after that, which of course is my sort of like little visual joke. 15-minute parking, but it's about a 6-hour painting. Here's another one, sort of using the path of the windshield wipers as, a compositional device here. Another little video of my palette in my lap and my sketchbook and the painting and my view. So that show, or these works culminated in a show that was called August. It was, as I mentioned, a recreation of a summer night. It included not only these paintings, but also some sculptural works. It included smells and sounds and this sculpture in the middle of the room that has live grass growing on it and a knocked over lawn chair and a light on top of it that it's difficult to tell from this image, but it's very orange and it very closely matches a high pressure sodium bulb, which is what older street lights look like. And I had recordings of insects playing in the gallery, recordings that I had made in my parents' backyard. So that's sort of the gist of what we have today. Now we're back to the present, finishing up our little road trip and parking. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. This was sort of a broad overview of a lot of different projects and of an entire decade of my life. But I hope that if you're here, you'll drop some questions in the chat. And if not, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my contact info. And thank you so much.
That was awesome. Yeah, can you
Thank
talk a
you.
little bit? You're actually in your van, so I would hope that we can actually have a larger kind of view of it
Yeah,
before I
for
ask you.
sure.
So this is it, right?
Yes. So here's I don't know if you can see, but here's the front seat. This
Yeah.
is a refrigerator that's right here.
Wow.
And then behind me, there's a sink, which has a bunch of stuff in it.
Sure.
Um,
And this is the kind of setup you did the 50 state project in, correct?
yes, yes. So I lived in this van for, I didn't really mention a time span, but I lived in this van for a year total, with my partner, and we did get along very well. Everybody always asks. Um, And I made all of the paintings, or almost all of the paintings from the 7-Eleven project also inside this van. I did make a few in actually the car that's parked right next to me, which is the Tiguan. Um, there were some parking lots that were too small to for the van, so I would paint inside the Tiguan instead. And I made smaller paintings, but it's difficult to paint inside a car because you can't really get back from things, of course.
Yeah. I was, of course, you talked a lot about kind of the relationship of George O'Keeffe and you being partnered with a photographer and she also being partnered with a photographer it wasn't lost on me, the kind of connections there. And I'm assuming just because you said you got along so well that it was a better relationship between the two of you than Stieglitz and O'Keeffe.
Yes, yes, considerably better than Georgia and Alfred for sure. Tom and I get along really well, and I'm also really heavily influenced by his work. As I mentioned, he's a street photographer, and the sort of immediacy and the documentary qualities of street photography are something that I think a lot about in my own work. Of course, I can't be a camera, I can't be a photographer. It takes me much longer to make images, but I still am looking at the sort of um, the the compositional strategies and the working styles of street photographers.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with the question is that you mentioned in your talk the idea of the car as the lens, and I guess my history and my own personal experience with plein air painting is that this is all about your point of view and so forth. But it seems that the kind of way you're setting up your paintings is that you are intentionally putting this kind of barrier of a lens, we'll call it, between you and in the or in part of the process. Uh, could you talk a little bit about maybe just that choice that you've chosen to kind of remove the directness of your interpretation of the subject matter using a lens?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's something to be said with these images of 7-Elevens, and maybe I should share my screen again so we can look at them.
Or just like the idea of the rear view mirror or, using the windshield as kind of that idea of a lens and making that part of
Yes.
the painting.
Yeah, I really got interested in the car and its sort of multitude of views and framing devices, and the sort of there's something definitely to be said for the multiple layers of glass between me and the subject matter in a lot of the images. Of course, there's the windshield, and then there's also like the storefront glass, or in some cases, it's like the rear view mirror and then the rear windshield and then the glass of the storefront, which. Um, I didn't think so much about that from a conceptual standpoint, but visually, glass does really affect colors, and I had a lot of fun painting images. You saw the one where the window is sort of cutting the image in half. I also, the sort of idea I was trying to convey through those images was the experience of sitting in the car at night. Um, a lot of people have asked, like, oh, do you feel like these images are voyeuristic? Occasionally people will be like, oh, these are a little creepy, um, which, it's all open interpretation. But I've found that people who had the experience of sort of hanging out in parking lots at night sort of feel that shared experience through the images. I can always tell who's a night owl and who's not by people's reaction to these images.
Definitely not a night owl. The last question I have before I pass the torch so other people can ask questions. The idea of, do you feel like that you grow as a painter when you are setting yourself up with limitations, like having to do paintings from your specific location, or if you have or even like the lighting that you were talking about, like having not perfect studio lighting, do you feel that that improves the artist, improves you as a painter?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I am sort of a perfectionist at heart, and one that understands that that doesn't really serve me. And so the more I can kind of interrupt that, the better. The more I know that I make better paintings when I'm feeling loose and when I'm feeling challenged. And so, yeah, things like a difficult lighting setup, or I work with a very limited palette, or sort of material constraints, or things like that tend to produce better results for me.
Awesome. Any other questions? Barbara.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, well, if this has been a wonderful trip. Thank you so much. Um, are you ever tempted to expand your paintings that you make? Some of it reminds me of Diebenkorn and some of his highway scenes. And I love the division of space, but you
Yeah.
do what you see. But do you ever want to expand them into big paintings?
Well, first, thank you so much. Thank you for coming, and also thank you for mentioning Diebenkorn because I do adore Diebenkorn, one of my first favorite painters. I do look at his work a lot. As for scale, I do think about making larger works. The scale of the works in the last two projects that I showed, so 50 States and then August or the 7-Eleven paintings, were all specifically limited. For logistical reasons. And I always feel as though the scale of a painting needs to have a reason. I'm not really interested in making big paintings for the sake of making big paintings. I like painting small. I've made big paintings. I paint murals sometimes, but for the 50 States project, all the paintings that I made were painted to fit inside of a certain box so that they could be stored while we were traveling. And then for the 7-Elevens, the painting size was limited by the size of a canvas that could fit in the front seat of the van. So the largest painting is 24 inches tall and 12 inches wide, and it's 3 panels. I could only paint on one at I like there sort of being a reason for the scale of things. I did just buy a big roll of canvas, actually thinking about larger works, but I think I would like to have a reason for it before I go that direction.
Thank you. That was really a good answer. Thanks.
Go ahead, Trisha.
Sure.
I, this was wonderful. I'm so glad I have been here this morning. I love your whole story and what you've been doing, Kate. As
Thank
Jordan
you.
knows, I follow a Stanford professor who's a futurist, and he's predicting that with the final perfection of self-driving cars, it's going to profoundly change that, and other disruptive technologies are going to vastly change the way our whole society is structured. And like a lot of things, I think getting to 95% of there is happened, but another 5% to really perfect self-driving cars is going to take a lot longer. I mean, relatively a lot longer. Yeah. But he predicts, that cities are going to have vast unused. Everyone is going to realize for every car they own, they could save about $5,000 or $6,000 a year if they just use self-driving cars for getting to work, in the grocery store, in the doctor's office, and so on. And so when you're going to do a long trip, you just rent what you need, or buy it if you're going to have it for a year. But it's going to make a profound changes in the way we live our lives in the next 10 or 15 years. So don't destroy any of your little paintings. They're going to be great, historic, significant artifacts for the future, for another.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, and keep going.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I do think about that. The car has really shaped our landscape. And I even think about electric cars, right? Like, will gas stations go away? Probably eventually. And instead we'll have charging stations, which look very different from gas stations.
Nicole, got a question?
Yeah, well, two comments and a question. The first is, Kate, your sense of design is so beyond. It's just spot on. And I think it's especially clear in those those lino cuts, your control of the composition. And secondly, I'm sorry we made you cry in crits.
That's okay. It's part of the experience.
Yeah, I guess so. I cried my own, I suppose.
It wasn't you, Nikki, don't worry.
The other thing is, and just like a technical one, like how do you keep the oil paint from just spreading through the car?
That
Yeah,
is
just
such
so
a good
curious.
question, and I actually have the answer right here. I will take you there. We will climb to the back seat. I have a big sheet that goes over everything, just a big drop cloth that I would put across the entire seat of the car. And there is a little bit of paint in the car too. You can see some sort of there on the door. And it definitely got on the sun visors.
That's impressive.
But yeah. I also wear gloves. I think that helps somewhat. But yeah, I try not to ruin the car. Try my best.
Well, Nicole, not to put you on the spot, but since you were her teacher at some point, do you have any stories of Kate as a student that we need to know about?
Nothing embarrassing because she's pretty in control. She's not an awkward person, so no, but I will brag on her a little bit. We do this summer sketchbook project where we tell all of our rising seniors over the summer you have to spend like an hour every day in the sketchbook. And I specifically remember hers as being like beyond. It was terrific. And I can still remember there was an image of like a house from the exterior. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I
remember
do.
that one. It was like spot on, beautiful, and we do it every year. And hers was one of the best that we've had. Looks like what she's doing now. I mean, it was great. So not embarrassing. I don't think embarrassing.
Oh, thank you, Nikki. That's so nice.
Sure. Oh, did that embarrass you? Good.
Mariana?
I just wanted to let you know, I think there's questions in the chat too. Ellen had a question. I can read it if you want. It says,
Or go ahead and read it.
using an example of the one with an SUV's red lights in your side mirror, did you rely some on a photo?
That's a good question. I did a little bit, but not so much. Sometimes what I would do is like for taillights in particular would be the one instance of that where I would like snap a photo while I was there. But I would still do all of the painting there inside the car. And mostly what I would do is just wait for another car to kind of like get in the same position. I would make a really quick sketch while the car was there. And sort of when another car would come back in the same position, then I would get a sense of the color again. That was sort of my chance to reinforce that. So yes, a little bit of photo reference, but for the most part, directly from life. That's why there's never people in my paintings. People are always like, "Oh, so lonely. Why are there no people?" And
yeah,
I'm like, they move too fast.
Beautiful, Kate. I really enjoyed the journey, and I hope you enjoyed it too in your life. It sounds like you did. But I wanted to ask you some logistical questions. Can you tell us a little bit how you prepare the papers? And I saw a lot of red or orange little tidbits. So obviously you had a sort of a underpainting at least in some of them, and also the logistical question of where do you put them when they're still wet to dry. And one unrelated question, which is when you're in the parking lots at night, for example, are you alone or is your partner with you just in case, or how do you handle that?
Good questions. Mostly I'm alone. But I'm in the car. I have the doors locked, which is actually why I originally started painting in the car, was like from a safety perspective. I had first thought, okay, I'm gonna make all these plein air paintings and I'll bring friends with me. And then I just thought, oh gosh,
that's just going to be a logistical nightmare, always getting someone to come with me. And also, I am not good at like talking while I paint. I really
Right.
am sort of, focus on what I do. I do like painting with others though, but it worked out to just be alone. Um, Also, I was often painting very late at night. Most of these paintings were made between like 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., which is really my like ideal time of the evening. I'm a super night owl. But usually my partner would be at home and awake and would check in on me periodically. I would always get texts like, "Are you alive?" Like, yeah,
Right.
I'm good. I'm listening to Harry Potter and making a painting and like in my happiest world right now. As for the paintings themselves, so it's Arch 140 cold press watercolor paper with 4 coats of gesso.
4.
And then
Okay.
4 coats. Because I like a houndstooth sort of. I like when there's a texture on there. I don't sand between coats. I like sort of a tooth there going on. When you get 4 coat, you sort of get 2 and 2. And you're right, they are toned underneath. I do love sort of like a quinacridone magenta tone underneath my paintings. I also, for the 7-Elevens, a lot of them also were like orange and green, and I was playing around with different colors and playing around with sort of
and are those
allowing
in oil
that to come through.
Is the underpainting
tone
in oil or acrylic?
No, it's acrylic. And what I usually do, at least for 50 States, what I would do is I would just take the tube and like squeeze it directly onto the paper, smush it around with a rag, dry super fast, and then make a drawing right on top of that.
And where do you dry the paintings when you're traveling, especially?
Yeah, I should have included pictures or brought one with me, but I have these little boxes that are kind of like cigar boxes, I guess. Yeah, they're about 8 by 8 by 1.5 inches, and they open like this. I would tape one painting inside each side, and then they can dry in there. And I had 3 or 4 boxes with me, and I would just rotate the paintings out. And those also served as like the board that I would tape the painting to as I was making the painting. So that was the limiting factor on the size of the works. They all needed to fit inside of those boxes. So no dimension larger than 6.5 inches.
Got it. And do you use an egal kit to try to, medium or anything to have them dry faster, or no?
No, I actually don't use any mediums at all. The paintings that I made for 50 States were all painted with just one knife, one diamond head palette knife that has a head about 1.5 inches long. I just was like totally streamlined, as simple as possible. It's not feasible to carry solvents with you when you're traveling in a car or living inside of it. You don't want to have the solvents inside there. So basically I just eliminated them. I actually sort of inspired by Nikki, actually. I know she's eliminated solvents from her practice. I did use some brushes for the 7-Eleven paintings, but I just sort of just paint to brush to canvas straight up. No mediums.
Great. Have you considered water miscible oils? Not that is the end all, but the water miscible oils. Have you ever?
Oh, mixable? I've thought about it a little bit, but I have a lot of oil paint, and
you have to use it up.
May as well use it. And I love oil, and I have a pretty good system that works. I don't really use mediums that much, and I don't really feel the need for them so much. Even when I paint with a brush, it's kind of like I'm painting with a knife. I only paint with brights for the most part. And I like them like really stiff and really short. And so it's basically like painting with a knife.
Right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It's great. Other people and other questions?
Looks like Arissa has a question.
I have a question. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Arissa.
Awesome talk. So good to hear you talk about your work.
Thank you.
You showed one really funny painting from high school, maybe, or like a very early painting in memoriam of your first car. And it says Kate Carr on the license plate. And there was just something so on the nose and sweet about that. And then you also talked about how like there's never people in your painting, and I was thinking about how there's never really cars in the painting either. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense because you're painting from the inside, but it's true, it's a lot of empty parking lots. So do you want to talk about that at all? Like the car?
Yeah, good questions. Well, first of all, good catch on the Kate car. You're right, that is so high school and so on the nose, but also that really was my license plate. I had a license plate that said Kate Carr for many years. And it was because I was a huge fan of Batman and the Batmobile. And so I had my Kate Carr. I have since forfeited that license plate, which is so tragic. But there were 3 iterations of the Kate Carr, all now resting peacefully in a yard somewhere. As for not including cars so much in the work, originally I think that was just because I didn't like painting cars and like they're really hard. But it was during the pandemic when I was painting a lot of landscape painting, sort of continuing in the 50 states vein, because I started that in 2019 and finished in 2021. So there was this like gap year in the middle where I did 17 states a year at home and then 33 states. So during that year, I was painting mostly like around the neighborhood. And that's when I was like, okay, time to learn how to paint cars. Get over your fear. You can do this. This is just like painting anything else. And the paintings that I made from the 7-Eleven ones were like the first time that I really felt like, okay, like that's a car. Like we got it. Marissa, you are so good at painting cars. They just really feel like cars. There's something about the reflective. I think it's not only that they are reflective, but also that they are very non-geometric. That is extremely challenging for a painter like me who loves to paint architecture and straight lines. It's also why I struggle with trees, but I'm working on that one too.
It's true, there is something very awkward about a car.
It's like it doesn't like it's almost like a car is like a face, it's like if it's a little bit off, we know immediately. We're like, that's not what a car looks like. I find it very challenging, but I've been really enjoying painting them recently.
Sweet.
Any other questions for our artists this morning?
I just wanted to, I guess it may be more of a comment, but I was just curious about Kate. I feel like what I really gravitated towards during your presentation and what was exciting is like I feel like land and landscape is really interesting because it's kind of often like spaces between us and other people or like other buildings and stuff or the space under us as well. And I feel like your paintings really, especially because the just Jordan, you were talking about a little bit the lens of the window of the car and like one, it was making me think of other like how painting windows, like home interiors has been so popular for so many artists and like painting windows. And it's kind of that, well, it's literally a window, but it's that way to see outward to the world, but also reference the space that the viewer is in. So it positions the viewer. And as a person who also growing up spent a lot of time like hanging out with my friends in my car, also growing up in the suburbs and like not really having places to hang out. And it kind of that car feeling like a private space that can be personal. It's your own space. Especially at nighttime, it's kind of like a bubble that you have where you're really close to the world around you, but it is definitely the way that you're accessing the space around you too. Like it's, I also think sometimes about how like a lot of our experience of landscape is also like where we're willing to go or like how far can you actually go. And so while cars provide some sort of comfort and you're not actually out there in the world, it really positions you and it's very honest in a way. And like, this is how I'm viewing things. And so I just think that that's really nice and it feels contemporary kind of thinking about like seeing things through the window of your car. I mean, so many of us, I don't know if so many of us drive around in this area, but I feel like I end up driving around a lot and a lot of what I see is from my car. DC has a ton of traffic and I spend a lot of time just like sitting and looking. Yeah, I just wanted to appreciate that though. Thank you, Kate. This was really lovely.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's really funny that you mention interior windows because I think that's probably where I'm headed next. I've been thinking a lot about painting a portrait of a house from the inside out, of just speaking of scale, I've been thinking a lot about making full scale paintings of all the windows in the ground floor of my parents' house and then positioning them that way in a gallery so that it's like you're standing in that space seeing those views. So that's where my head's at right now.
That's so sad. One thing I was wondering, I understand, and I like that your paintings are small because I also think like paintings don't always need to be big. I don't know. It's very nice. It feels very personal, intimate, especially for like when you have paintings with such dark colors that are shifting. You want people to look up close so that they can see that. But I guess I am curious because now that, especially that you said that too, because some of your paintings of objects or still lifes are a lot closer to the size of what you're painting, whereas often things that are like of gas stations or the 7-Elevens, like they're going to be pared down in size so much compared to real life. Could you speak to that a little bit? Like, just like how real experiences.
Yeah, thinking about scale. I think the way that I think about scale is more so in the experience of making the painting. Like the part of the reason why I like making really small paintings is because I can do it all in one sitting, and it's like one breath, one thought, sort of like one moment, and I really struggle to like return to the energy of a painting later on. And that's why larger images can be really challenging for me. It's also sort of like I like to paint wet into wet. Like I'm not sort of layering kind of painter, and that is challenging too. But yeah, I don't know that I've thought all that much about like the relationship of the actual sort of like representation of the scale of the object. But you're right, when I do still life painting, it is much closer to like a 1-to-1 versus like a little tiny. It's almost sometimes like the bigger the view, like the smaller the painting I want to make somehow. I don't know why.
And I think both are lovely, but I was thinking about like Cynthia Dano, like how she like the seriality of her work and how like because she has a project as well where she went around America and painted was it Light Atlas, and then but then also another painter, Josephine Halverson, she goes out and paints from life, and they're much larger paintings that I feel like the objects that she's painting typically match the size in her painting. And the works, both of those artists have very different effects, but I do think it's interesting thinking about like how the scale of the works, but then also how the objects become larger or smaller in the works, just affects like our viewing of them.
Yeah, I would say actually there is one particular painting in the 7-Eleven series where I thought a lot about that, which was the painting I made of the sign, the 15-minute parking sign, which is pretty much a 1-to-1 scale, and also like a 2D painting of a 2D thing, which is not something that I've done before, but it was fun, and I really enjoyed making that image, and is the kind of image that I would never have made if I wasn't working in this sort of like serial way. When I in a series like that, it allows me to take risks, I think, because I'm always like, whatever, I have like 14 more of these that I'm gonna make, and I always tell myself like not all of them will be good, and there's something like very freeing in that. So that wasn't your question, but as an aside.
No, I think that's great though. I was just noting, I think there's another question in the chat.
Yeah, in the chat, right. You want to read it, Lindsay?
Oh yeah, I can read it. Yeah. I think from Pamela Caravori, any connections between your focus on third spaces as a communal space, but your paintings not including the transient people and cars who populate these spaces? People are always on the move.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely like a quiet, I think, to the images, which results from there not being people or cars in them. And I think that's less of an intention and more of like a natural capturing of my experience of making a painting and sort of the meditative quality of sitting and capturing an image. And yeah, again, it's really just about things moving quickly through the frame. I haven't painted. I think the other reason I don't include figures is because, as Nikki can attest, we did a lot of figurative work at William and Mary, and I think I was ready to move on from that by the time that I graduated. But maybe the figure will come back into my work. Who knows?
Right. Right. And there's someone else who is asking when is a good time to visit your studio, Corey, I think.
Oh, send me an email. I would love to have you come by. My My email is up on that slide, but also I'm sure that through this we can be in touch.
Great. Thank you so much. This was
Sounds
an
good.
excellent talk. We thank both Lindsay and Kate for joining us this morning. We hope to see you guys again at the Art Clinic online at some future date. Just a reminder for everyone, in 2 weeks we have Eric. I need to get his last name right. Celulet, I think his last name. It's kind of Frenchish. Very cool mechanical drawings and prints, and also sculptor. So I think everyone will really enjoy his work. Very different from today, but incredible. And then, of course, join us next Friday evening at Glen Echo Park for both Eric's exhibition, the Stone Tower First Floor, and also Bennett Vadnais' exhibition on the Stone Tower 2. So it'll be very cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful.
Have a great week.
Thank you,
Thank
Kate.
you so much for hosting me. This is really nice. Thank you so much.
Fabulous.
Weekend.
Bye.